You're watching The Word on Cars. My name's Nish, and this is a Mercedes Benz E220d. It's all the luxury for anyone that's really serious about luxury needs, and I'm about to explain why that is. So, you're wondering how what is essentially the base model offering of the E-Class is all the luxury anyone really needs. Well, to answer that question, we need to go back in time to 1993 when Mercedes-Benz first introduced the E-Class nameplate. See, back then, and unlike today, luxury was all about quality, craftsmanship, opulence, comfort, and even the price tag. If you were driving an E-Class back in 93, everyone that saw you knew you'd made it, knew you wanted the finer things in life. Fast forward to today though, and luxury, if you think about it, isn't about luxury at all. Instead, when we talk about luxury cars, it's more about the technology and performance that they have to offer while being comfortable. Luxury cars have, understandably, evolved to keep up with the times. But what if you're not fussed about technology or performance? What if you just want a car that is, by definition of yesteryear, a luxury car? Then look no further, because the 10th generation of E-Class, which was rolled out in 2017, also known as the W213, gave us the E200, which was the entry-level model, and this car, the E220d, D for diesel, which are exactly that, luxury cars, while keeping up with the times from a safety perspective. Mercedes-Benz did refresh the W213 E-Class in 2021 with new front and rear fascias and more technology, but dropped the diesel variants from the lineup. 2024 will also bring yet another E-Class, the W214, so if you fall in love with this E-Class after hearing what I have to say, you might even be able to find one of these things for a bargain. Now, as you'd expect from Mercedes-Benz, the E-Class got a gorgeous mug, very much in keeping with that of a luxury car, which it is. This particular E220d is well optioned and has the AMG Line Package, which the E200 can also be optioned with. So aesthetically, it's a little more on the sportier side and includes a different front fascia, which is very AMG-esque, with very large and very fake air intakes on either side. Hey, I said it's a perfect luxury car. I didn't say it was perfect. There's also a sporty yet elegant grille, also part of the AMG Line Package, with a massive Mercedes-Benz emblem. The reason it's so big is because the technology for driver assistance systems like adaptive cruise control sit behind the emblem, which is also heated to make sure you can always see what's ahead. And is it just me, or does this grille remind you of a biplane? Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Anyway, to finish off the front end, there's beautifully crafted LED high-performance headlamps with daytime running lights, which Mercedes say have a broad light distribution and daylight simulating color temperature for nighttime driving safety. These headlights really give the front end of this E-Class character. No one's going to miss you coming down the road in this thing. Then there's the back end, which is very much in keeping with the luxuriousness of the E-Class. It's clean and simple, yet elegant. You have these beautiful LED tail lamps with daytime running lights. The lenses have what look like diamantes, so they glisten under the sun. This particular car also gets the AMG line treatment back here, although the difference is so minor that I'm not sure it was even worth the effort. Then we have the controversial Mercedes-Benz exhaust tips, which look fantastic but are completely and utterly fake. Quick tip to all you manufacturers out there, you don't need exhaust tips if you're not going to actually poke the exhaust through the bumper bar. I mean, seriously, come on Mercedes-Benz. Anyway, let's talk cargo area in the E-Class, starting with getting in. Mercedes gives you 3 options to choose from to open the electric tailgate. Use the key fob, press the button in the handle of the boot lid, or kick your foot under the bumper bar if your hands are full and you can't reach for the button on the boot lid. Now, space-wise, there's 540 litres back here with a large opening to get things in and out. Compare that to the Lexus NX I just reviewed, which is a mid-size SUV, mind you. You get 20 litres more in the E-Class, which is impressive. If you need even more space back here, you can drop the back seats down, which are a 60-40 split, although taller items won't go through from the cargo area into the interior thanks to a low-hanging structural beam. Dropping the seats is also easy enough. Simply pull the latches in the cargo area. There's also a center pass-through for longer items, which can be opened by pulling the hidden latch behind the center headrest in the back. The E-Class doesn't get a spare wheel thanks to run-flat tires, so there's also a substantial amount of space under the cargo area. It's big enough for a couple of duffel bags or backpacks, which is handy if you're strapped for space. And lastly, for those that like an organized boot, there's a netted storage area on the side, a single bag hanger that's hidden when not in use, and cargo tie-downs to stretch out a cargo net or strap items down. Moving over to the side of the E-Class, you gotta admit that this thing has a beautiful silhouette. I mean, just look at it. The rear end of the E-Class swoops down along with the belt line, giving the illusion that this has a touch of coupe DNA in it. There's also a strong crease line at the bottom of the doors that extends elegantly into the rear bumper bar. This particular E-Class, thanks to the AMG Line Package, also gets 14-spoke 20-inch AMG wheels that look elegant and sporty at the same time, side skirts that are subtle and blend into the side, privacy glass for the back windows, and upgraded brakes. 4-piston calipers up front with cross-drilled and vented rotors, and single piston calipers on the rear with vented rotors, which is a good bit of kit. Now, to get into the E-Class, simply walk up with the key fob on you, wrap your hand around the handle, which unlocks the doors, and away you go. To lock up, simply touch the indentation on the handle, and you're done. Mercedes throws in this functionality for all 4 doors, which is handy. Now, the key fob itself is quite elegant, to be honest. It's a quality piece made of brushed aluminium, piano black plastic, and has a bit of weight to it. There's also a hidden feature you may not know of. The loop at the bottom of the key fob is actually the physical key for emergencies. If you don't want to hang the key fob on a keychain though, you can press the button on the back and push the physical key in for a cleaner look. It's a small detail, but it's a small stuff that counts. Functionality wise, you can lock and unlock the doors, pop the boot as I mentioned, and close the windows and sunroof if you've forgotten and walked away. In terms of getting in and out, the front doors open plenty wide and the steering wheel moves out of the way so there's room to step in and out easily. The back doors don't open as wide, but there's still enough room to get in and out comfortably. The AMG Line Package also throws in illuminated aluminium scuff guards up front that say Mercedes Benz, and plain aluminium scuff guards in the back, so your backseat passengers won't know how special this car is until you park yourself inside. So, that brings us to the interior of the E-Class, which in a word is gorgeous. There's really no better way to put it. The piano black center console curves up to meet the black ash open pore wood grain, which feels just as spectacular as it looks. It feels natural, which continues upwards into the stitched artificial leather on the dashboard, which then extends into the doors with a beautiful aluminium strip that runs across the length of the dashboard and into the doors, as if it were a single brush stroke. Then there's the ambient lighting, which wraps around the piano black center console, runs along the aluminium strip across the dashboard and into the doors, along the top of the instrument cluster and infotainment screens, and lights up the footwells and door handles. So with 64 colors to choose from, you won't have any problem setting the mood in here. Like I said, it's just a gorgeous interior. On the materials, the stitched artificial leather on the dashboard and doors, which Mercedes Benz calls Artico, is as close to leather as it gets. Unless you've been told, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. There's also aluminium everywhere in here too, from air vents, including the dials to control airflow, to the door handles, trimming on the center console that wraps around all the controls, and the beautifully crafted analog clock. It's everywhere, and it's luxe. So, it's gorgeous in here, but is it comfortable? These seats, which are covered in Napa leather with stitching and sportier than the standard seats thanks to the AMG Line Package, are superbly comfortable. Seats include thigh extensions for added support and are well bolstered on either side to hug you, but are still wide enough for larger humans. They're also very adjustable through aluminium controls that are in the shape of the seat on the doors, along with buttons for the heated seats, ventilated seats were an option, memory presets, and even a button to select the passenger seat, which can then be controlled using the driver's seat controls. Sounds like a great way to have some fun with whoever's sitting there or get yourself into trouble. Then there's the climate control, which has a dedicated row of aluminium toggles to adjust the dual zone system with climate information displayed on screen. Space-wise, there's plenty of headroom up front, plenty of legroom, and the cabin is open and airy thanks to the design of the dashboard that sweeps up and away from passengers, and the glass panoramic roof, which includes an electric sunroof that tilts and slides. Now, infotainment-wise, the E-Class didn't get a giant screen or even a touchscreen like we've come to expect from modern cars. Instead, there's a slim 12.3-inch infotainment screen that shares a single binnacle with the 12.3-inch instrument cluster, more on that one later, and blends really well into the dashboard. The infotainment system, known as the command system, which was replaced by the newer MBUX system in the refreshed E-Class from 2021, responds to user input quickly when you're moving about the screen and can be controlled either through the rotary controller, which is easy enough to use, the touchpad, which is a little fiddly but you get the hang of it eventually, steering wheel controls, which include touchpads that you swipe your finger over to operate, or voice controls. There's also a row of quick access buttons on the console to switch between navigation, radio, media, phone, or settings, or you can navigate to these from the home screen. The system does take a second to respond to input through the quick access buttons or when you're entering a function through the home screen though. The image quality and resolution of the infotainment system, as you would have already noticed, is fantastic for a car that came out in 2017. There's basic customization, you can have 2 sources of information side by side, and the system includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The best thing though about this system has to be the Burmester 13 speaker stereo, which sounds fantastic. It's clear and crisp. Aside from the command controller, the center console is also home to the aluminium drive mode toggle, which gives you access to Eco, Comfort, Sport, Sport Plus, which makes the engine and gearbox even more responsive than Sport, and an individual mode to adjust engine and gearbox responsiveness, the steering feel between Comfort and Sport, or turn off auto start stop. Cars equipped with the optional air body control or air suspension system, which this E-Class doesn't have, will adapt the suspension based on the drive mode and can be customized through the individual mode. There's a button on the console to turn off the parking sensors and a button to access the parking pilot, which will park the E-Class for you in parallel or perpendicular parking spots, while also giving you access to the raft of high-quality cameras around the E-Class to see everything around you. By the way, the rear camera is hidden and pops out only when it's needed, so if it needs a clean, you can pop it out through the infotainment screen. Then there's a button to operate the automatic start-stop, an aluminium scroll wheel to adjust volume, and a power button to turn off the infotainment system. Unfortunately, there isn't an auto hold function to hold the E-Class stationary at a traffic light though, which is a little disappointing. Then we have the instrument cluster in the E-Class, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a 12.3-inch screen with 3 styles to choose from: Sport, Classic, and Progressive, depending on your personal preference. You can also use the steering wheel controls to access and display service, driver assistance, trip, navigation, radio, media, and telephone information between the dials and adjust display content. The dial for speed is fixed, while the dial for RPM can be switched out for navigation and eco display or consumption information, and adjust the heads-up display through the instrument cluster. In terms of the heads-up display, it works well, but it's fairly basic by modern standards. You get speed, basic driver assistance, and navigation information in your line of sight. On driver assistance, and aside from the parking pilot, the E-Class came standard with a fair bit of safety tech, which was groundbreaking at the time. There's active brake assist to stop you from rear-ending the car in front, and it'll even tell you when you're tailgating with a red warning triangle on the instrument cluster, which is basically saying, buddy, you're too close, and if you need to stop in a hurry, you're on your own because there's nothing I can do. There's also active blind spot assist, as the name suggests. It'll warn you when there's someone in the next lane through lights on the wing mirrors, audible warnings, and also pull you back in. Then there's Drive Pilot. The E-Class will follow the lane markings up to 210 km per hour, which is incidentally also the top speed of the E220d, which is a little crazy if you think about it, or it'll follow the car in front where there are no lane markings up to 130 km per hour and steer through a curve on the road. You can take your hands off the wheel for 30 seconds while it's driving you along, but it'll ask you to grab the wheel if you don't. What's even more impressive is that Steering Pilot will change lanes for you when Drive Pilot is active. All you need to do is indicate which way you want to go, and the Merc will do the rest for you, which is very cool. Now, even if you're not using Drive Pilot, the E-Class always has your back. If you get too close to the lane markings or surrounding vehicles, it'll pull you back in, apply the brakes, do whatever it needs to make sure you don't go off the road or into others. But wait, there's even more. If the E-Class detects that you've been unresponsive for a period of time, emergency stop assist will kick in and it'll bring itself to a full stop and stick the hazards on. There's also evasive steering assist, which will help you steer around obstacles at low urban speeds like pedestrians. Pre-safe impulse side explodes and activates an airbag in the side bolster when it detects a side impact to push the occupant close to 7 centimeters towards the middle of the E-Class to move you away from the impact. To top it all off, there's pre-safe sound, which emits an acoustic signal through the stereo when an accident is imminent to briefly weaken the connection between the eardrum and the inner ear to prevent hearing loss caused by the sound of the accident, which is just unbelievable. I think it's safe to say that in the E-Class, you're in safe hands. Then we have the controls to drive the E-Class, starting with the steering wheel, which in this E-Class with the AMG Line Package is sportier with a flat bottom, perforated leather grips, and aluminium spokes. The steering wheel gets physical buttons and the touchpads I mentioned earlier to control the infotainment system and instrument cluster. Behind the steering wheel, we have paddles for the transmission to manually change gears, stalks to control wipers, indicators, adaptive cruise control, and adjust the position of the steering wheel, and the gear lever. Now, the gear lever for the 9-speed auto is easy to use: a half push down for neutral, a full push down for drive, push up for reverse, which also pulls up the rear camera along with a bird's eye view and gives you the option to choose from a raft of views I mentioned earlier, and a button at the end of the lever which you push for park. The electric parking brake lives on the dashboard below the lighting controls, and having the AMG Line Package, this E-Class also gets aluminium pedals down under. Lastly, we have storage starting with the glove box, which isn't all that big, but it does have a vent that can be opened or closed to cool the space. Under the piano black lid on the center console, there are 2 cup holders that can be removed for more storage, a wireless phone charger, which mind you was an option, a USB-A port, and a place for the key fob. Under the center armrest, which opens outwards from the middle, you find more space, an elastic strap, 2 USB-A ports, and an SD card reader for media. The front doors also get decent sized bins with bottle holders, and along with the ceiling controls for interior lighting and the sunroof, Mercedes have even thrown in a sunglass holder for your shades. Jumping into the back of the E-Class, I gotta say it's a nice place to be. We have the same level of quality, same materials, beautiful black ash open pore wood, brushed aluminium, ambient lighting, and Artico artificial leather on the doors with stitching, which, like I said up front, still looks and feels like leather, and the Napa leather seats, which are part of the AMG Line Package. In terms of seating back here, there's plenty of knee room and headroom, and being an E-Class, there's ample space for 3 adults back here. As is the case with most rear-wheel drive sedans though, there's a fairly large hump on the floor for the drive shaft, so you'll need to rob space from passengers on either side for your feet. The seats themselves are so comfortable. I can honestly say that the back of the Benz is just as comfortable as the front. There's no discrimination in the E-Class. Now, technology-wise, there's very little back here. Remember, the focus here is luxury. There are, however, vents in the center console, trimmed in aluminium with aluminium dials to adjust the airflow, same as the front, an ashtray, this is definitely a 93 E-Class Reborn, and a 12-volt power outlet. Then in the doors, we have bottle holders and storage space. Behind the front seats, we have hidden map pockets, isofix points on the outboard seats, and top tether mounts across all 3 seats, reading lights on the ceiling on either side, along with the glass roof that extends into the back, which fills the cabin with natural light, and an armrest which folds down to reveal storage under the lid, and 2 cup holders which you push to pop out. That wraps up the back. Time to get behind the wheel and see how this luxury sedan gets down the road. So, driving the Mercedes Benz E220d. Now, I think it makes sense to start by talking about comfort, given I've been banging on about luxury and comfort pretty much this entire video. From a comfort perspective, the cabin of the E-Class is sensational. It is superbly comfortable. Comfort aside for a second, there's also the visual appeal in here. I mean, everywhere you look, you've got sunlight bouncing off the aluminium surfaces in here. You've got the open pore wood on the doors and the dashboard that feels sensational. You've got the Artico artificial leather on the tops of the door sills and on the dashboard. It still looks fantastic. It still looks like leather. It feels like leather. The Mercedes have done a really good job in recreating, even though it is artificial, that feel of leather. Then there are these Napa leather seats, which you just melt into. They hold you in place really well. They're well bolstered. You just feel really comfortable going down the road in this car. Now, from a suspension perspective, I mentioned that Mercedes did offer the optional air suspension set up to this car. This one doesn't have it, but I don't necessarily think you need it, to be honest with you. I think the suspension is so well tuned in this car. It works really well. It manages bumps and undulations and potholes and uneven surfaces. It just glides over all of those things and just keeps you comfortable. It really is a comfortable car. It actually surprises me how composed it is, given it's, a touch over 1,800 kilograms. It really manages its weight very well. All in all, I mean, this is just comfortable. So then we have the engine. Now, this being an E220d, we have a 1.9 litre turbo diesel under the hood. It's good enough for 143 kilowatts of power, which isn't groundbreaking, but it does have 400 newton meters of torque. So this thing is properly peppy. There's enough power to get up and go, plenty of power to overtake at highway speeds. You're not going to feel like you're missing out on anything from a performance point of view. From a consumption perspective, this thing will do 4.4 litres per 100 kilometers, which is really impressive. Performance-wise, it's not a fast car. 0 to 100 is 7.3 seconds, but this goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Luxury is confused with performance these days. This thing, though, is very much about luxury and comfort, so performance numbers don't really matter all that much. All I can really say is that it gives you enough performance to keep you happy, keep you comfortable, and keep you safe. Now, as you can see, I'm stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. That's Melbourne for you. Good opportunity though to talk about the 9-speed automatic transmission in this car. Now, the gearbox is like a hot knife through butter. It's silky smooth. You can use the paddle shifters on the steering wheel to change gears manually, or you can set up your individual mode so it stays in manual whenever you're in that mode. Now, speaking of modes, going into Sport will hold revs higher. Going into Sport Plus will hold revs even higher to give you a bit more pep. In Sport and Sport Plus modes, the engine does become more responsive as well. Steering wise, I'm quite surprised at how connected to the car you actually feel. It is an electrically assisted steering rack, but it changes direction really well. You do find that it leans a little bit when you go around corners too quickly, but that's expected with a suspension setup like this, which is really pitched towards comfort and luxury rather than sportiness. But all in all, I think the gearbox and suspension and steering in this car are perfect. Then we have all of the driver assistance systems in the E220d. And like I mentioned before, there's a lot of it. Now, right now, I'm using Drive Pilot. The car is basically just driving itself along the road. All I need to do is keep my hands on the steering wheel. You can take it off for 30 seconds, like I mentioned, but the car will let you know that you need to put your hands back on again. And it steers around curves. It does brilliantly. Now, I got to say though that no system is perfect. This was the inception of a lot of this technology back in 2017, but to most part, it works really, really well. We've got the lane change. All I need to do is indicate. The car will check your blind spot for you, change lanes, and all you need to then do is turn off the indicator. I mean, it all works brilliantly. In stop-start traffic, this thing works fantastically. It'll come to a full stop. It'll keep you moving for about 60 seconds, but if you don't move in 60 seconds, you'll just need to give the throttle a little light tap and the car will just keep moving forward. So from a driver assistance system perspective, this thing is fully loaded. It is very much up to date. What more can you ask for? So overall, the E220d is a beautiful car no matter which way you look at it. Now, being a Mercedes Benz, they're full of options, so I'll include some details in the description below of the options that were made available here in Australia, but I'll also include a link to a brochure that'll give you all the details for options for the E-Class. From a second-hand price perspective, prices are holding pretty strong. You can find one of these things on the second-hand market for around 35,000 Australian dollars, excluding on-road costs, with high mileage. You can find a low mileage car for around 70,000 Australian dollars, excluding on-road costs. Now, if you wanted to buy one of these things brand new, unfortunately, they don't make the E220 diesel anymore, so you'll have to opt for the E200. An E200 will set you back around $115,000 drive away. And I think that says a lot about this car. Prices are holding strong because it is a great car. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that the new E-Class is around the corner and should be coming out in 2024. That may bring the prices of the current E-Class down a little bit. So if you are looking for one of these cars, and certainly in the next year to two, I think there'll be some changes to the pricing of the current E-Class generation. Overall, after driving this car and looking at all the details, I still stand by my opinion that the E220d is really all the luxury anyone needs.